Hi, Justin.
Hi, Dick,
Hello, Tom. Mhm. Hmm.
and hello to two empty rooms. I guess that would be Justin and Sue.
Right.
How's the weather over there on the west side of the state?
Very nice today. But
Hi.
Hey,
I'm afraid though my wife Mona is getting older. Her memory's starting to fail, and she's having a lot more trouble getting around and
oh my.
avoiding accidents.
Uh, wow. Yeah, well, I have experienced a bit of that myself.
Hmm.
I can tell you that if it's possible that support groups over the 7 or 8 years have been very helpful for me initially to get advice from other people, and then now I'm more in a position of helping people on their journey. So
Hmm.
easy to say I've been there, but
Yeah,
no journey's the same. That's for sure. Hi, Nancy, and hi, Luba.
yeah. And my daughter gave me a book called Being Mortal,
Yes,
which is quite good. So I'm learning
yes,
about that. Yeah.
yes, yes, yes.
Mhm.
And let's see, I did just send out a one-page version of the information from Nancy from the Social Justice Coordinating Council and a little bit about what would happen in the meeting and in the annual meeting, and I will talk about that when we get to that topic. So I guess until we get a majority of board here, we've got one, two, three, four. We need a quorum of five. I have a picture of Justin Bell's habitat,
It's
but
not
no,
4 o'clock though either. We have a couple minutes.
no, that's exactly right. Oh, and my computer just said upgrade to my Mac operating system. Try tonight or restart now. Well, I don't think I'll restart now.
Oh.
And did you get my info by text, Nancy, for the information you asked for? Good. I'm looking out my dining room window. I hung my hummingbird feeder up 2 days ago, and I've seen one hummingbird, a very tiny one. I think it's possibly the smallest one that habitats Eastern Washington. I've seen it now 3 times today. So
Would that be an Anna's? The small one, is that the Anna's?
I don't know the names, but I did look it up once before. It's so hard for me to get true coloration. Somebody else who was here said they had a name for it, but it is the smallest one in Eastern Washington, whatever one that is. So I guess they like the mixture I put together.
I hope it's just sugar and water.
Yeah, yeah, sugar and water, and I use 1 cup of sugar, I think, to 4 cups of water is the recipe I have in the past. Hi, Lynn. So it's 4 o'clock and we have 5 board members. So that's, let's see, who are we missing now? Mm,
Doug?
Cindy, who's not going to be here, and Doug,
Doug Deaton.
he's in Ireland, but said he would join us. So we have a minimum, absolute minimum to conduct business.
Oh, here's Doug.
There's Doug. I see a windmill in the back there, Doug.
No, no windmills.
That's not Ireland. You're supposed to be in a pub, aren't you, in Ireland?
Oh, wait, no.
No, I
Wait,
know.
let me do my I gotta find how to turn on video. Let's see. Start video. There we go.
Oh, there, yes. I
All
was
right.
hearing you and not seeing you. Okay, well, it's now 4 o'clock. We are hoping for Dick Steele. At some point here, he's hard to get
Dick
a hold of. He doesn't have a cell phone anymore. Wait,
Dick Steele? Dick Steele? Or
yeah, I just,
I have Karen's number. I could try her.
well, see what you could do. Yeah,
Okay.
I'm gonna mute here and get back on
how's everybody?
What time of day is it for you, Doug?
Midnight.
Oh my goodness.
Uh, just enjoyed a wonderful play at the Abbey Theater here in Dublin.
Sorry about that.
I sent a
Okay.
text, so we'll see.
Okay. All right, we have a very crowded agenda and we're gonna lose two of the board members at about 5:20 or so. So we're gonna try to get through as much of this as we can. And I moved the agenda that was published, sent out to everybody is the wrong agenda, even though I sent them a revised agenda last Sunday. They didn't send out the revised agendas, but we're moving all the old business issues up to the beginning part of shortly after the beginning of the meeting. So the first order at 4 o'clock here, let's see. The first order at 4 o'clock here is to call to order. And the second item on the agenda is to approve the agenda. This would be the revised agenda that I hope all of you got. And it simply moves, pretty basically just moves the three items under old business up to very shortly after the beginning of the meeting. And that would, then we'd hopefully be able to get through the important parts of business, even though we may lose Sue and Luba at 5:15-ish or 5:30-ish. So with that agenda, for those of you who got the revised agenda, and even the old agenda is okay, it's just reordered. Are there any comments about the agenda, and should we try to proceed with that, including trying to keep to the timeframes, which I am pretty committed to trying to do. Seeing no objections, we'll approve the agenda. The next thing is the minutes of the last meeting. I noted a couple of things which we need to have Marilyn correct. At the top of it, she calls it the March 26th, 2024 meeting, and in fact, it should be 2025. And then she spelled Rob Neal's name wrong, and she misspelled aesthetics. And under President's Report number 5 and under reports. So those are the only corrections I had. Does anybody else have any corrections?
Nope.
Okay, having no corrections, we'll approve the minutes as they were presented to us with those very minor corrections. Okay, the May meetings. The regular meetings would occur on, let's see, the 21st of May, which would be 1:30 p.m. because trying to accommodate a better time for Doug. And May 28th at 4 o'clock for the regular meeting. And I guess, can we approve that with the caveat that as we get down later in the meeting, if we have to do any official business before the annual meeting, we may have to move those meetings up a week because the deadline for sending out the notice of the annual meeting will occur before that May 28th meeting. And if we need to have a meeting, we'll have to bounce our meeting back a week. So can we approve those dates with the caveat that if we have to, we may move the meeting if we could agree to it?
Yeah,
Okay. Okay, then the next thing that we need is we need to have a floating trustee. That would be myself as president, Doug as vice president, who hasn't been for a while. How about you, Justin? Would that work for you? Would you be able to attend a 1:30 meeting on the 21st? And you need to unmute yourself.
We don't hear you. Justin, we cannot hear you.
You need to unmute.
Okay, is that better?
Yeah,
Yes.
Okay.
100%.
All right, yeah, it looks like I can do that. So that's May 21st.
Yeah, and
And it's at 1:30.
yeah. Does that work for you?
Yeah, I
Okay,
don't
if,
see a conflict at this time. I've got some
okay,
medical stuff coming up, but I don't see a conflict.
okay, if we had to move it a week earlier because of anything we need to do for the annual meeting business, could you do that?
At this moment, it appears yes.
Okay, so we'll do that. Okay, item 6, normally, ministers reported update, and because Todd is on his modified sabbatical, we will not have that report. And ops team from Luba,
There was no meeting, so no report from me.
hey, that's a short report. Wow. Okay, now we're down to old business, and the first item on there is a discussion and any action we need to take on the apartheid free community vote. We approved in one of our former meetings the actual the motion that would go onto the annual meeting, and that was one that was suggested by the Social Justice Coordinating Council. And so we approved what the motion would look like. And we discussed whether or not to have a secret ballot or an open ballot. As you may, those of you who got the report that I just sent out that came from Nancy, the coordinating council, and you can address this in more detail, Nancy, has recommended that it be an open ballot. And I need to point out that that isn't in our control. If when that motion's on the floor, if somebody makes a motion to have a secret ballot, it's not debatable according to Robert's rules, and we don't have any bylaw that addresses it otherwise. So we bounce back to Robert's rules as is, the way we do things. And it takes only a majority vote. So when that motion's on the floor, if there's a motion to have a secret ballot, we just, and seconded, then we vote. And if a majority of the qualified voters vote to have it, then we'd have to be prepared to do a secret ballot. So that would mean that we would have to have pieces of paper to pass out and people just write yes or no. And that we would have to have a way for the electronic ballot to take place. And I'm working on that with Terry Anderson and some other folks to see if we can make that work. So do you have anything that you'd like to share with us other than your report, which is in the hands, I think, possibly in the hands of all of us?
Everyone should have received it. I sent it out this afternoon. This would be the only item that would be considered a secret ballot, correct?
Well, unless somebody from the floor moves that any vote could be a secret ballot. But that's up for us to may at least make an initial recommendation that it be a secret ballot. The board can say that we'd like to have it be a secret ballot, and that can be overridden in the motion by a vote to have it be an open ballot.
Well, as you read, if you had time to read the report, we feel strongly that our sanctuary is a safe place. That if we can't come together and discuss difficult issues, that's not who we believe we are. And we feel that there is no need for a secret ballot because to do that, as I said in my notes, would highlight some kind of secrecy around this issue. It is not like this is going to be written up in the Spokane paper that UUCS voted to become a apartheid-free congregation. It is a nationwide organization. There are many UU churches who have signed on. It's not like it's going to be published to the world. You'd have to know where the heck to go to see our signature on there. So we feel strongly that this is not like the movie, what was it, 8 years ago, that caused such a ruckus. And I know that for some board members, it was horrific because you received horrible letters from the temple. We don't believe this issue with what is going on in Gaza will be anything to really cause people consternation. So that's why we feel it should just be, I support it, or I don't.
Well, and just to emphasize the 4 points that are part of this apartheid-free community are very broad and refer to any kind of a worldwide situation, although one of them does specifically refer to the Israeli-Palestinian
Mhm.
situation.
Yeah.
So how about board members want to speak up on your choice?
Nancy, will this, I will be out of town when you do this next weekend. I understand it'll be recorded, so I could,
Well, what we have set up is an informational meeting this Sunday. I can check with Barb to see if it would be recorded. But then there are going to be several Zooms where you could join in to ask questions, receive more information. We have folks speaking from the pulpit for 4 Sundays, beginning in May through June 1st. What Barb has said is she'll do a Zoom meeting Sunday, May 11th after church, and then 2 more weekdays in case people aren't available on the weekend. So there's going to be plenty of opportunity to become informed.
all righty, thank you.
Absolutely.
Addressing the situation of, I think the rest of us would commend the council on the program to educate and inform the congregation. That, from my standpoint, is great. Getting to the point of whether the board wants to remain neutral, take a position on secret or non-secret, that's the conversation that we're supposed to have.
I have thought about it for some time, and I think Nancy's team brought up some good points. And I'm in favor of having an open ballot.
Any other comments from the board members? And then we'll go to Lynn and to the Steels. Dick.
Well, I'm, of course, strongly in favor of the motion, but you know, there could be a few Trump supporters in your congregation who might not be. But I noticed a substantial change in the Jewish community recently. Like in Seattle, the number one rabbi in Seattle, of the biggest congregations and most influential rabbi, published an op-ed recently where it seems like the Jewish community is regarding these charges of anti-Semitism as simply unacceptable. That they want to acknowledge divisions in their own community and not go along with some of this stuff. So there's definitely a change in the tone of some of these things, which make it more acceptable. But I still wouldn't want to put pressure on, if there are a few people who don't tell me. There may be some, I don't know.
Well, is that a position for or against a secret ballot?
Well, I'll support that, but again,
Support a secret ballot or an open ballot?
yeah. Well, if maybe I'll abstain because I am concerned about maybe there may be a few people who, there always are a few people who want to go against the grain in any organization.
Okay, with the number of people we have here to vote, yeah. Okay, so we could just let it lie and not do anything at all. Any other comments
Yeah.
about which way to go?
Excuse me, so it was agreed that Dick said, just let it lie and go whichever way it's going to go. Is that what was it decided?
In other words, it's going to be an open ballot or just raising your hand unless it's called for on the floor for
Okay,
it to become a secret ballot. Is that what I'm understanding?
Yeah, and that would require a majority vote.
Yeah,
Yeah.
So probably it would end up being a
So-
no.
So if we do nothing at all, then it will be the motion that we already approved a couple of months ago will go on the annual meeting agenda. And there will be a yes or no vote, although any motion that's on the floor can be amended, but you know, it's a set in concrete concept. So we can't amend what they have as their as the position of the apartheid-free community. So it's going to be a yes or no vote.
So we as a board are doing nothing as, I just want it clarified for me. As a board, we're just saying, just put it forward to the congregation and let them decide how they want to vote?
Yeah, well, we're not, if we want to make a motion to say that, somebody needs to make a motion and then it can be seconded and we can vote on it. Or we just leave it lie, and any motion that normally goes before the annual meeting is an open vote, a floor vote, you know, holding up the cards.
And if you didn't have a chance to look through my notes, one of the things that is happening this Sunday is Jewish Voice, I thought it was Voices, but Jewish Voice for Peace will be presenting at both services. And that's, I think, going to give people a lot of information about how this group, Jewish Voice for Peace, feels about what's going on in Gaza.
That would
Okay.
be very helpful. Yes, thank you.
Any comments from Lynn or the Steels?
I read the Nancy's write-up, and you might point out that the Jewish Voice for Peace, I think some years back, had not addressed the issue of Zionism, but now they are openly opposing the Zionism that's supportive of what's going on in Israel.
Okay. Not hearing any motion, we will just we'll just proceed to put this on the agenda for the annual meeting, and that's it.
I saw Lynn's hand.
Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, yes, Lynn.
Thanks. I just really quickly wanted to ask, where did the idea of a secret ballot come from? I assumed it was from Nancy and the Social Justice Coordinating Committee. Otherwise, I would have, I was surprised by it, frankly. And I'm very glad to hear their position of that it should be an open ballot, that we are adults and we can vote openly and freely in our sanctuary.
It
So-
was raised in the last meeting or the meeting before about whether or not this would be controversial enough to have a secret ballot. And at that time, although no vote was taken, kind of the board leaned toward a secret ballot so that people would feel free enough to vote and not abstain. Because if enough people abstain, that's equal to a no vote, and we need a majority to pass any ballot. So that was the thinking, that maybe if it was a secret ballot, that more people would vote and we'd have a better chance of having a majority pass the motion. Because if people are afraid to show how they feel and they just don't vote, that's an abstention, and you run the risk of not having a majority to approve the motion.
But when I read the material that was on the table last weekend, I read that it's apartheid rule that we don't like. That's what convinced me. I thought, well, I don't want apartheid, anything. And so I personally feel comfortable, because at first I was leaning towards a secret because I thought it might be helpful. But this is apartheid. I'm not looking at it, and it very well could be seen this way, as a Jewish or a this, or it's apartheid that I'm voting on, if that's helpful at all.
Well, if somebody feels like they want to vote, but they don't want to identify how they vote, they can make a motion. And then that would be voted on, and it would take a majority of people there to say, let's have a secret ballot. So I think I think it'll work itself out. So if that, we just aren't going to take any position whatsoever on that matter. Now the, am I hearing a comment?
Just add one point. I think under policy governance, this is the way to go. Your Social Justice Coordinating Committee has recommended an open ballot unanimously. And my opinion is that's where you should leave it.
Yeah, I think that carries a lot of weight. Absolutely. The next item is 8.2 on the agenda under old business. And this is the one that about changing the size of the board from 7 to 5. And when we discussed it in the last meeting, I'll summarize it. Anybody that doesn't think I've summarized it right. There was, the question, one of the issues that was brought up was if you move it from 7 to 5, have we really disrupted things? A positive point was it would make two more people in the congregation available to take on other tasks. And that was something that was favorable. We discussed a little bit about reducing that down if we were to take a bylaw change, then we'd have to change the quorum, because right now the quorum is stated as 5 based on 7. And so some adjustments would have to be made. And then one of the things that came up was regarding how the endowment team functions. And the common understanding in that last meeting was that it has a minimum of 5. However, when we looked at it more closely, and Sue talked with Dick and got some information, they actually have 7 positions.
Right.
And but they can function with a minimum of 5. So I'd like to invite Dick as a past president, and also he and Karen both involved with how do you see that working for a board that would have 5 positions and a minimum 5 positions, and how would it work if we were to be flexible to not have any top limit of positions?
So no, a number of different items there. The endowment team indeed has 7 slots. But we do have written in to our procedures that we can operate with fewer members than 7. This comes about in part because there's a fair degree of carryover on the endowment team. The people who join often stay around for quite some time. Donna Borden Rhodes was probably the best example. I think she was there forever. She was certainly there before I was. But that has to be balanced against the fact that we serve 3-year terms. So our practice is this type of flexibility gives us the opportunity to have a person serve 2 consecutive 3-year terms, which is the limit after which that person has to go off the board. Take a gap year, and if they're interested in coming back after a gap year, then if they are, their name is put in nomination and they are elected by the congregation, which is how people are placed on the nominating team, which has been the history, that the people who were nominated in fact are then voted into the office. Then they come back on. I view this as somewhat different from the way a board of trustees operates. We also have a very singular focus, unlike a board of trustees, which has to cover a lot of things, including, discussing open votes or closed votes and how to handle that. As included in the bylaws, the endowment team, the purpose is to manage the endowment such that we make annual contributions to the operating fund sustainably, annually, and in perpetuity. Those are written into the bylaws. An operating procedure of ours is we try always, and we've succeeded so far. Fingers crossed for luck going forward in this crazy new economy that we seem to be entering with a lot of volatility at the top. But our practice has been never to reduce the amount that we contribute to the operating fund, it will either be increased or at minimum remain where it was the previous year. So
Let
those
me-
are, it's kind of, yeah.
Let me try to be succinct because we're up against the time frame. How do you see, is it possible in your mind to envision how a board of trustees could operate with a language that would say a minimum of 5 people?
Well, if it did, you would be, I think it could be workable. I think that you put yourself, I think the board puts itself at some disadvantage by doing that. I think that 7 voices, provides opportunity for a wider range of viewpoints to be offered. You have the issue of, okay, so what constitutes a quorum then? And if you had 5, that would presumably be 3. I would, given the fact that the church now has the opportunity to draw on members who are remote as well as in our community in and around Spokane, I think that it unless there is pressure and external factors that drive people towards a smaller number of trustees, I think it's advisable to try to keep it at 7, draw on people from around the country. That's my view.
Okay. Other board members who'd like to address this, and then Lynn, you certainly as a past president may jump in, but let's hear from board members about 5, 7, or the third option, a minimum of 5.
I'll jump in.
Yes.
I think 5 protects us because we'd have more likely to have a forum and can always have members. If we include this thing where we have limited, if this thing about limited participation by other people, limited vote like you suggested, we might come up with 6 or 7 anyway. So my thought, especially if there's any historical truth that there's trouble getting board members, so I would lean towards a minimum. My vote is for a minimum of 5, with possibly more. And especially if we get other people like Dick or Lynn or other people who can vote under special circumstances, that gives us a quorum under almost any condition.
Well, we would have to define a quorum in our bylaws, so there would never be any question. So if we had 5, we'd have to decide what a quorum was. And a quorum could be 4, it could be 3. That was one of the things we'd have to work out in a bylaw proposal.
All right, is there any, not having been a former board member, I don't have a sense of how hard it is to get 5 or 7 people for a quorum. So is there any history of there being trouble getting 5 or 7 people for a quorum?
Well, my experience, I've sat in a lot of board meetings as a parliamentary advisor. I don't recall that we failed at a quorum. Lynn, you were on the board, and Dick, you were on the board from the very beginning. With the 7 members, do you all recall instances in which you failed to get a quorum of 5, which is what is stated in the bylaws?
I personally don't recall any. Lynn, how about you? Yeah.
And
I think Justin might be confused about 2 different issues here that are on this agenda related to ex officio members, which is, I'm assuming, coming up later, and 5 to 7 members. And the difficulty, the only reason this came up at all is possible difficulty from the nominating team's perspective of finding 5 willing people to serve, or 7 willing people to serve on the Board of Trustees. But it doesn't seem to be an issue this year. There's already 7 people ready to roll. So maybe it's just a moot point this year, and we can talk about it another time.
All right. Let me just finish that. My point was based on, I had a sense that there was a history or trouble getting appointing enough members to serve. That was my point. If there's no history of that, then my argument kind of just probably no point to my argument. Go ahead.
Let me have Sue first and then Nancy.
Um, one, I would like to have this board at least go on record for how they feel about this if we make a decision to move forward or do anything. I have thought about this quite a bit since it came up, and I feel pretty strongly I want, as a congregant, to have 7 board members. I do not want to take away from my board, hoping that those people will fill other positions. The board is very important to me, and I would like to see a firm odd number be at 7. And I was also on the board for 3 years, and I don't recall ever having a problem getting a quorum.
Yeah.
Nancy,
I served on the nominating team for 6 years. And we always got our man or woman. Yeah, there were some times when you would call and you hope that they would say yes, and they said no. You know, but we always found the number of people we needed.
Okay.
I think the more voices we have, like this sort of discussion, to go down to 5 or God forbid 6, some even number that we can't break ties in, that would just not be favorable.
May I say, it's half a,
excuse me, let me go first to Dick. He had his.
okay, sorry.
Yeah, I think 7 is a good number in terms of getting more voices in, and unless there is a real big issue, and it doesn't seem like there's a big issue in getting more members. So
Okay,
I would support that. I've been on a number of boards, and that's generally you start getting below there, and sometimes your bubble gets too narrow.
okay, Luba.
Yes, Dick, to follow you. Actually, it's not only a good number, it's a magical number in Russian culture.
There you go.
I go for 7.
Okay, we don't have to go anywhere. It is 7, and as was suggested, I think by Lynn or by somebody else, if this becomes an issue to a future board can deal with it. So it sounds like we don't even need a motion. We just don't go anywhere.
Mhm.
Because if we take a motion to keep it at 7, then somebody can say that sets a precedent, and I don't think we need to do that. So that's going to be a no action with regard to 8.2. The same as on 8.1 on the apartheid thing, that was a no action to just leave it as normally things would come before the annual meeting. So then 8.3, let me get my notes here. 8.3, just as I reviewed with you all, the last time we talked about this in the board, and it was a suggestion that we look into this. It actually came from Lynn, that since we're having trouble getting a treasurer, and as you know, I tried advertising for a treasurer for about 6 weeks and didn't get anything at all. And then that forces a board member to be a treasurer, a token treasurer or otherwise. Oh, hi, I see Jean Larson dropped in here at about 4:35. So the idea that Lynn kind of came up with and that we discussed, and I was asked to try to draft some language, was that there be a possibility of appointing a ex officio, non-voting trustee treasurer. And then as that would meet the state law of having a trustee being on the board as the treasurer, and as far as finding a person to do that, it would be no more difficult than just trying to find a treasurer who wasn't a trustee. So that was what I came back at you, and that is option one of this stuff that I circulated out. And then in another discussion, and I had with Lynn, the idea of whether or not this position, if we had it, appointed ex officio trustee would be a voting position. And if we don't clarify voting or non-voting, we don't have anything in our bylaws unless we write it in the bylaws. So then we go back to Robert's Rules of Order, which would say that an ex officio, unless clarified as non-voting, is a voting person. So that would mean that we would have, if we did this and we didn't clarify it as non-voting, that would mean that the appointed trustee would be one who would have pretty much full voting privileges, although there's some limitations on whether they count as a quorum or not. There's a few little kinds of details like that. And then the other thing that came up that maybe was more my idea was, what if we had it that the voting privilege of such an appointed treasurer trustee would be only to break ties? If there were 6 members of a board and a 3-3 vote, that then that appointed trustee could choose to break the tie. So that's option one and option two, and then option three would be just having limited voting privileges. So the board wants to jump in on any of that conversation, and then after the board speaks, then Lynn or Jean, and I see Betty
Question.
Bradbo. So yeah, I see your hand, Dick. Jump in on
Yeah,
this.
well, because the treasurer, it's required by law that the corporation have a treasurer separate from the president. And I wonder if there's an implication that person must be a voting member. You might want to check with a lawyer to see how that's been ruled by the courts. That wouldn't be surprised if they say a treasurer must be a voting member if it's required by state law. So I would investigate that to find out.
That is a possibility. As far as I know, that is not the case, but I don't know that for certain. The only way we would do that would be to go to Mary Giannini. I've asked her we ask her questions. I do, or we do ask her questions. So that's,
Yeah, well, I think it'd be helpful to be clarified on that, because I mean, that's the reason you have to have a
Happy to
treasurer.
jump in here, Tom, anytime and save you a bunch of time,
Yeah.
of time.
Okay.
yeah. Well,
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah, let's leave that point that you've raised, Dick. Are there any other things that people would like to raise?
I would like to know if in the people who are attending that have been on the board, how often do you see ties?
Okay, that would be addressing to Lynn and Sue in the past, and Dick. I don't know whether whether you've been on the board or not, but how often are there tie votes when you have, say, 7 people? You've been on the board, Nancy. You're shaking your head that you don't recall tie votes.
Mhm.
Lynn?
Because we've been 7 or 9.
Yeah, it used to be 9.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah,
And now,
I don't recall any tie votes during the time I was on.
okay. Lynn?
Okay, I just wanted that to be
Okay.
out there.
So that would kind of, in a way, point to, you don't need to have a option 3, which would be only someone to break ties.
Mhm.
That kind of seems to militate against that.
Mhm.
But any other comments about a full voting privilege or a non-voting? That's the only difference between option 1 and option 2 that I presented.
Me again.
Yeah, Sue.
I know which way I'm leaning. Lynn, you have me very curious. If nobody else from the board wants to speak up, what it is you wanted to share.
Let's go ahead then. We've had a request. no other comments from board members that I'm seeing. So Lynn, you obviously have some information that you could share with us.
Well, I hope you all received my email, those of you who are on the board. I do want to start by expressing my concern in how this conversation has been handled outside of this meeting. Last week, I called our board president in good faith to share my own proposal for a bylaw amendment regarding voting privileges of all ex officio members of the board. I didn't want to simply rubber stamp the version that he had sent me to review, and I expected that he would bring his proposal forward, and then I would offer mine at this meeting, allowing for a collaborative, thoughtful discussion. Instead, there were 3 pre-scripted bylaw amendment options circulated via email without my knowledge or my input. That not only sidesteps our board's email policy, you guys, and the principles of policy governance, it also erodes trust and the collaborative process. I understand that I am not currently on the board. I continue to attend meetings because I believe deeply in our policy governance model and in the responsibility of board members to understand and uphold it. I hope you will take some time today or in the very near future to address a critical question. What is the board's responsibility when one person repeatedly takes unilateral action and shapes the narrative outside of open, transparent meetings, and then openly states to me in a conversation that he's going to continue to do so? We've seen the consequences of this similar patterns before, and if no one is willing to hold leadership accountable, then policy governance becomes meaningless. It's a one-man show rather than a shared, transparent system of trust and responsibility. I will set that aside for now. I just needed to get that off my chest. And I want to share with you the amendment I originally intended to propose. I am suggesting that we remove the phrase non-voting from our bylaws regarding the 2 ex officio board members, the senior minister, CEO, and the upcoming treasurer if that person becomes an ex officio. It is a small but important change, and it aligns better with our governance model and our congregational values. I'll focus on the senior minister's role since that one seems to be where the most concerns lie in the conversations I've had with other congregants. Our bylaws currently designate the senior minister as an ex officio non-voting member. That designation likely comes from older hierarchical governance models, not from a collaborative partnership envisioned under policy governance, where the minister serves as a CEO and strategic partner to the board. According to Robert's rules, ex officio simply means someone serves by virtue of their role. By default, ex officio members have the same rights and responsibilities, including voting, unless that privilege is intentionally removed. I believe that's what's happened here, but no one I've asked can explain why, beyond that's how it's always been, or they weren't elected, which is exactly what ex officio means. They were invited because of their role, not elected by a vote. That's not a thoughtful foundation for making a decision to withhold voting rights. Our current practice invites the senior minister into deep conversations about mission, stewardship, and direction, but then expects silence when it's time to decide. That's not only impractical, it's inconsistent with our values. This congregation claims to believe in democracy, and we do. We believe people deserve a vote on the matters that affect them, and board decisions, including shaping a ministerial agreement, do affect our senior minister. Could their views possibly influence others? Of course, and vice versa. That's the whole purpose of a transparent discussion. If a true conflict of interest arises, they, like any other board member, can recuse themselves. We don't need to legislate around that and make everything conditional on this or that. Restoring voting privileges would not only be a technical correction, it would affirm our commitment to trust, transparency, and shared leadership. It would reflect the values we claim and strive to live by. I hadn't planned to gather the required 10 congregants to support bringing this proposal to the annual meeting until after tonight's meeting, when I had hoped to see whether the board might choose to bring it forward as a board-sponsored amendment. But once I received the email with Tom's pre-scripted options and saw that I wasn't on the agenda, as we had discussed, I went ahead and gathered that support. 10 members have already agreed that this topic deserves open discussion. The only way to ensure that happens is to submit an amendment removing the phrase non-voting from our bylaws in reference to all ex officio board members. I've done a lot of research on this, so if you have questions about what it means to be ex officio, we don't need a lawyer. It's all very easy to find. I'm happy to answer any questions you have.
Okay, how does the board want to handle this? We've talked about appointing a treasurer trustee, and we've talked about voting and non-voting. And now we have somebody, not on the board, but a respected person, a past board member, suggesting that we get involved in another issue, which is to make the minister a voting member of the board, of course, which would make eight people, as if we remove that and didn't do the ex officio treasurer, then we'd be back to 9. So do we want to just deal with what was before us? Or do we want to take a pass on this and go ahead and have it be dealt with at another time? Or, as Lynn is suggesting, that there'll be an amendment presented that we will consider as a board, whether or not to put it on the agenda for the annual meeting. So any comments from board people?
May I ask a question?
Yeah, go ahead, Luba.
Well, first of all, just a remark. I did take time to reflect on Lynn's concern, and I respectfully disagree that there was a prescriptive or prescripted options. I was not affected, whatever I was reading. So, the question for Lynn, when, do you know the date or years when a senior minister and the ex officio board member, trustee board member were voting or had voting privileges?
Are you referring to the senior minister only, Luba?
Both.
I don't believe ex officio members of our board have ever had voting privileges. I believe they were always removed, but that's an intentional decision that I can't find anyone who knows or any reference anywhere as to why that decision was made. So I want to be super clear. Ex officio, by default, the standard is that ex officio members of any organization have full privileges. That's the standard. That's the default position. An organization has to intentionally remove them. And that happens typically in hierarchical organizations where there are different levels of authority and people have to report to certain people, where conflicts of interest arise because of authority positions. It's a different level, it's a different governance model than policy governance, where there isn't an authoritarian or authoritative position. Our senior minister does not report to the board as in a submissive role, and nor does any ex officio
But-
member.
But
So,
and I'm trying to move the meeting along. The simple answer to Luba's question is you don't, and I don't know as anybody else knows where that came from, except it's been in the bylaws for who knows how long. Isn't that about a summary of it, of the answer to her question?
Yeah, I understood that way.
Yeah. We basically have to decide whether to go on a totally different track from just a treasurer, trustee.
well, you don't really have to, I mean, you don't have to decide that, Tom. I have 10 people who are saying that they believe that it is appropriate to bring this discussion to remove ex officio.
And there's a process, Lynn, for you to do that, and you're
I
entitled to
understand.
do that.
What's that?
I said you're entitled to do that. There's a process for getting a member-sponsored bylaw
I know.
on it. So you've stated that that's in your back pocket, so to speak. So what I'm trying to get at is what does the board want to do at this point? And I see your hand, Dick.
Yeah, well, I noticed there are quite a few organizations where someone is an ex officio, and I think like the UUA, the president is an ex officio member of the and non-voting member of the UA board. So that kind of thing is quite common. And I'm just trying to think why. I guess there could be cases where maybe someone might not want to vote against a minister or a new UA or president or something like that. And it might be more a matter of some people might want to avoid possible conflict or issues of loyalty. But maybe Lynn's right that under policy governments, those things are less important too. The only other really practical implication I could think is that, like now, Todd's on sabbatical and not attending board meetings. If he was a voting board member, that presumably would affect the quorum. But I doubt if that would be very important. But that's a kind of minor thing. But to me, the more issue is this organization up to being comfortable with people supporting or not supporting the minister on things, and is the minister comfortable with that, having that out on the open, and because that's often this sort of divided loyalties or authority. And like a new UA board, the minister is voted on separately and has a sort of a separate kind of authority, constituency, and that kind of thing. And there's that kind of division of authority. And does that apply here or not? I don't know.
Okay, Sue, I saw your hand up.
I'm a bit speechless, which is unusual for me. But I'm hearing Lynn say that she can go ahead, she's gonna go ahead, no matter what we say, and bring this before the congregation for a conversation. I'm not convinced that I need more voting people, that these ex officios should be able to vote, be it for the treasurer or the senior minister. But it's a very interesting idea. And since no one has much history why this came about, I'll say that if there's going to be dialogue about it, I hope we can thoroughly hear both sides of why and why not.
Okay, I have something I want to say about it, but I do see that Jean has her hand up, and so I yield to Jean to express whatever feeling she has.
Okay, thank you. First of all, I feel this whole discussion should be taking place with the congregation, not just the board. Well, I guess Lynn's going to solve that problem by having a movement at the congregational meeting to discuss it there, but I think it's inappropriate for the board to discuss it in the first place because they're not the ones that would make the decision.
Well, it kind of, in response to where you're going, the board can put before the annual meeting various bylaw changes that it feels would be in the benefit of the congregation to discuss. So we could do that, and in fact, many bylaws or most bylaws come from a board because they see a need for it. So there is reason for us to discuss it, but you know, I'm a board member and I do have an opinion, and my opinion is that to have a senior minister and a chief executive on the board puts the board members in a position that it would be almost untenable. And if I knew that that was the situation, I would never have accepted a candidacy for the board because I do not want to be on a board in which I would feel like I would be intimidated by the CE and the senior minister, no matter who he or she is.
He is on the board.
What, I'm talking, please. So I can't see any advantage to doing this. The senior minister in this case can speak, they cannot make motions, can express their opinions, and that's just what they are. But I don't want to feel like I would be intimidated to bow down to anybody that is in a position of a CE or a senior minister while I was a board member. So that's where I would come from. And in the congregational meeting, annual meeting, if this subject comes up, you can expect that you'll hear this kind of argument from me as a member, not as a board president.
Well, I agree with you, Tom, on that point. And I also hear you saying that the board can decide what gets onto the agenda.
That's a separate issue, Gene, that we've got a limited time to deal with people here, and whether or not the board can put something on the agenda of the annual meeting is a separate issue. And please, let's not get into that because we have to decide what to do right now. Does the board want to take a spin toward eliminating, and at one point it would be very easy to modify the language of option 1 to change it very, very slightly so that the senior minister would also be take out the word non-voting. And then that what is left is being ex officio, which Robert's rules, says is a voting person with certain little quirks about whether they can be counted as part of a quorum or not. So where does the board want to go with this? To just kick the ball down the road to the next board or to the annual meeting, which there will be apparently a proposal which could be amended on the floor and all that kind of stuff. Sue.
I am for, because I think it's going to happen anyway, and I'm for it going before the congregation, making a choice.
So I don't know how to interpret that.
Well,
what?
I guess I don't think we should do more, the board should do more than maybe state our feelings on it, which we've been doing, but I believe Lynn's going to move forward as she should, and she's got her 10 people. So I'm saying do nothing, let it move forward.
Justin.
I agree with Sue.
Okay, I'll express my opinion. I think there ought to be a proposal from the board And I would move that we do option one. Option one is to have, simply deal with the issue of an appointed, non-voting, ex officio trustee / treasurer. Sue,
I'm not ready
oh,
to,
excuse me, Dick, I saw your hand first.
yeah, I'm not ready to vote for any of these options.
Okay, well, we won't vote for him if there's no second. Seeing no second, then my motion fails. Okay, essentially what we're doing is we're just not going to do anything. And then we'll let Lynn bring hers before the floor. Whatever she wants to do, and any motion on the floor can be amended. The thing that we haven't heard from here, and we won't hear from because the senior minister is not going to be at the annual meeting, at least that's how he advised me in a text. We're talking about a position which is filled by a person, which we all know, and that person is not here to express an opinion.
And
Or
I
input.
think that's a shame. I think that's a shame that our minister is not going to be at the annual meeting.
Well,
Yeah, well, however, sabbatical works or whatever, that our minister cannot be at the annual meeting makes me sad.
well, let me clarify that. He said he will not be there to make a minister's report. Now, whether or not, if there's a motion on the floor that involves him, that might change things.
Thank you.
But again, I would almost think that would be a reason to excuse him, you know, to recuse himself, but because the motion would be affecting him because of his position as the senior minister. But that would be for him to decide that. So my sense is, I see your hand again, Dick.
Yeah, I had the impression that one of Todd's reasons for the sort of partial sabbatical is that he wanted sort of to get away from the administration and the business side of things for a while and reflect a bit, which is part of a traditional purpose of sabbatical.
Yeah, we don't know that for sure, but that is the reason for a sabbatical, for sure. So the outcome of this is that we are going to take no action with respect to a appointed ex officio voting or non-voting trustee treasurer. Right? Okay.
Yes, and I'll say for myself, the reason I'm not stating further is because of an apparent or perceived misunderstanding in the emails that were shared. Lynn presented a totally different, larger proposal than what I read in Tom's. And I was not affected one way or the other by Tom's email. It was information I was grateful to have, to ponder and think about for this meeting. But I've heard two different things that we were going to say. And so Lynn's was, that's why I don't want to go any further.
May I
Okay.
speak about that?
Mm-hmm. Oh, I'm sorry.
Well, since you raised that point, all the thing that I will say is I significantly disagree with Lynn's version. So it's a kind of a he said, she said thing, and I won't go into it. I'm not going to get into an argument with anybody on that, except that that's not the version that occurred. So, Lynn, you had a comment.
Tom, we had a in good faith conversation, phone conversation,
And an in-person conversation, yes.
a phone conversation that ended in a plan of action for this meeting.
No,
And
commu- no, excuse me, I'm just not going to argue with you in this public meeting except to say that is not my version of it. So, and we need to move on because we're going to lose people here pretty shortly.
May I just brief comment?
Yeah.
Whatever information we get before the board is really beneficial for the people like me. Maybe other people can click the decision like that, and do this and do that. I cannot vote in good faith if I don't know enough information. And when I'm presented at the board of trustees within 5 minutes decision, no, I cannot do that. So thank you, Tom.
Well, and we did modify our email policy to which we are not going to deliberate. We are not going to make decisions, but we can exchange information, and that's written into the current email policy. And I believe we've been following that, and I've not had any adverse comments from any of the board members that they're offended by exchanging information as long as we're not deliberating and not making decisions.
Right.
Okay, the next item on the agenda then would be number 9, which is my report, and 9.1 is about KYRS. We are airing for 13 weeks, starting about a week ago, support for 5 programs. I sent the information to Rebecca and to Michelle that identified the programs, a 1-sentence description of each program and when the programs were aired and what the 2 messages were. And the only thing that was in the sun, much to my disappointment, was the names of the programs. And in order to find out when they're aired, you have to go to their website, and it is pretty hard to find. I went to the website, it's pretty hard to find, so I'm very disappointed. And I also am disappointed that the readers of our Sun do not know the message that's being there. And the only way they're apparently going to learn the message is to go to listen to the program formats. And our intent is to have other people listen to them, and I hope that they will, but we'll never know. The other thing is planning for the annual meeting is going on. Rebecca and I are going back and forth. We're sorting out who does what. I've got emails out to people asking to be tellers or counters. I've been in contact with Terry Anderson at Rebecca's suggestion to see if he would organize the Zoom meeting, the online function, including voting if we have to vote, and things like that. So we're putting things together. Rebecca will be asking for reports. You know, the annual report is like a 21-page document. I was actually surprised when I went to the website and looked at it. And the only reports that will be there is from the treasurer and from me for the board. And then the treasurer is supposed to discuss the budget and also give an update on the endowment fund. And Dick and and Karen Dornsiel are going to work to that. So he'll just have a summary report, and her detailed report will be in there. And then there'll be reports from the social activities, fairly new committee that will come out of operations. So I think we're working on that, and we have to have stuff for the notice. So that's 14 days before, which is a Sunday before the annual meeting on June 8th. So if there is a member-sponsored amendment, then it's, you know, reviewed by the board. And if it doesn't quite fit in with whatever's going on, the rest of the bylaws, we can talk with the persons that submit that to see that it's that everything fits together.
Tom, can I jump in just real quick to ask you or say,
Yeah.
if you need volunteers to check people off and sign them in, is that something that the board can volunteer to do?
Yeah, that was gonna be part of what I was going to do about the annual meeting. Rebecca said that the ops team can do it, but that she would welcome anybody from the board that would be involved with that checking in. So is there anyone else who would like to volunteer? Oh, I've got the Brattlebos have said they would be tellers. I've asked the Gammons, those are the people who count votes. And then we'll try to get somebody to work with Terry Anderson to report what he finds in the people that are online that can be reported to somebody that could be part of the vote tallying. So I'll be asking somebody to help with that, a little technical detail to interact with Terry Anderson.
I'm expecting to be on the Zoom. Really.
What's that?
I'm expecting to be on the Zoom.
Okay, wow, that's great. But you'll have the stage by yourself as you present the budget. Now, Rebecca said she's usually available to answer detailed questions about the budget. But she says it's the board's budget, although we haven't actually, as a board, to the best of my knowledge, ever adopted it as being the board's budget, which is something we may have to do. But she said that she has a conflict and she may not be able to be at our meeting. So that doesn't bode well, but that's out of our control.
Yeah, that's the thing with, if we adopt a budget, she would have to have it ready at the next board meeting. But then there's very little time to actually review what's in there. She thinks it's going to be pretty routine, that
Well,
there's not much room for anything new.
well, but that's part of a problem. The next board meeting on the 28th is after the 14-day deadline. So
But not for approval of the budget. This is not something like a new motion. I mean, the budget is something the board can do, that it can approve the day before, as far as I know. Isn't that correct?
No, if the board's going to approve the budget that's going to be part of the annual meeting, then the board's got to approve it before. That's why I said we may have to move up the meeting a week so that we have it a week in advance. That would put us being able to approve a budget.
Well,
before.
we should definitely do that then already, because we're not going to be able to approve the budget otherwise, if we had to approve it by a vote of the board before the annual meeting. I mean, why even have the May 28th date when we know it's going to have to be May 21st? Yeah.
Well, it'd be one, that's our scheduled date, and we can still do a lot of other of business. But in the past, let's see, we lost Dick Steele. Lynn, in your recollection, has the board actually by motion adopted the budget that goes to the annual meeting?
I don't recall that. I just recall the budget being given to us once, I mean, after the generosity campaign and possibly a second budget summit. And then we got a copy of the budget and brought it forward to the congregation if they had any questions before the annual meeting. I mean, I just remember being in the back of the church with the budget and saying, if people came up and asked questions about it.
Yeah, I'm not sure if we need a.
But I don't recall us ever saying, do we approve this budget?
Yeah,
It might be done at the summit.
If we present the budget to the congregation for discussion, that we have to agree to present it, which is almost the same thing. We'd have to say, well, this is the budget that Rebecca's worked up, and we're okay with it, and this is the one we're presenting to the congregation. So that's kind of a de facto kind of approval of the board.
That's the way I recall it being. And you've been there for at least the last year, Dick. It wasn't that it, Betsy Rush was the last president of the board, and you were the treasurer in that one also. And
yeah, I think we had some kind of de facto approval. So, and you could have that same kind of thing again, but it's still on the timeline. It's going to be if someone does have an issue or a proposal for some part of the change, we won't have very much time to discuss it or even debate it, you see.
Well, but that happens in the meeting. People can propose to change a line item.
But I mean, I'm saying that could happen in the board meeting right before. If it's going to happen, it will probably happen there, actually. I don't anticipate that, but normally that's might be where someone who is really concerned would come to the board in the board meeting before and say, I think we should do this instead of that, you know.
Can we
Well-
simplify this and just change the board meeting so that if anything comes up, we have a board meeting in time?
Well,
We can do that, and that's what I said in the beginning of the meeting, that we, we set these dates of the 21st and the 28th, but we could, we realize that we may have, for one reason or other, move them back a week.
Well, I suggest we do that now and we're covered then, just in case something comes up, and if not.
Okay.
question, is it really is it really required to have the board de facto accept this budget? If we're officially accepting the budget, maybe it is. But if it's just Rebecca's worked it out, looks okay, well, go ahead.
Well, the only thing that it says in the bylaws is that one of the things that takes place at an annual meeting is to approve the budget for the next fiscal year.
Right.
It doesn't say anything about the board approving a budget. So
Yeah.
I'm not
And
sure
so,
where
so is
that-
there an implication that budget should have been published 2 weeks before? That's going to be discussed.
Okay,
I don't know really.
if everybody could do it, we could move the meetings up a week. That would be on the 21st. The meeting would be on the 21st, and 7th or 11th, then the exec committee meeting would be on the 14th.
Yeah, because it does seem like
But,
that-
okay.
that we should be actually publishing the budget before the annual meeting. So
I don't know whether we can control that. So, well, we will have it, it'll be done by the annual meeting because it has to be done by the notice of the annual meeting. So that'll take place. So the only thing, do we want to move the meeting up just in case there's something that the board has to do with that? But
Yes, yes,
okay, so the question would be, if everybody agrees to that, and we did kind of in advance, Justin could make the 14th as an executive meeting, and can you do that, Doug, the 14th? And I'm seeing you doing that. I can't even get to my calendar. Let me look at my calendar on my phone, because I can't get past my 14th. Let's go to May, let's see. May 14th. Yeah, I'd have to skip a lecture I wanted to attend, but I could do the 14th also. So we're doing the 14th for the exec committee meeting, and we're doing the 21st for the meeting itself. And I'll let people know that means that that Michelle has to change, so we can get a link and all that, and I'll do that.
yes, and something in the sun, yeah.
Yeah, and I think shouldn't this budget be actually published on their website at least a week or two
That's-
before?
I just don't know exactly how that works. I will work on that.
Yeah, because otherwise it doesn't seem, I mean, if you just sort of present it the first time to people at the annual meeting, that's sort of like a de facto, there's not.
I don't recall seeing it before the board meeting unless I've gone to summit meetings and that sort
Yeah,
of thing.
so it seems to me like it might be a good practice to have it available before the annual meeting. Seems kind of, if it's actually going to be, if there's truly going to be any opportunity to debate it or anything else.
We will work on that, and that could
Even
be.
though there probably won't be, still just as a matter of principle, I think it should be published at least a week or two before,
Okay.
10 days. maybe.
We have to move on here. We don't have any other team reports. We have we don't have Cindy here to give a secretary's report, but she did tell me that she conveyed the minutes of the last meeting to the approved minutes that was verbally shared with me. Is there a treasurer's report that you have, Dick? Anything that you'd like to bring under that item?
This Rebecca says she's, working on all these things and asked about the generosity campaign, and apparently it's going well, but she won't be ready with numbers until,
Okay.
until presumably the main board meeting will have some numbers on the generosity campaign. But she doesn't have any right now,
Okay.
and she's saying the budget will be ready by then, but again, she's saying there's nothing unusual has happened, and expects the budget to be pretty predictable based on, last year's
I
budget.
have to go. And just for anyone who hasn't seen the chats, you might look at them from what Nancy said about the non-voting minister, what she might has, but I have to go. Bye-bye.
Okay, thanks for the reminder of the chats.
Okay.
Okay, and the other thing is, we have 5 delegates that we could go to GA with, and we have one person, Dick, who has already signed up. And I put a notice in the Sun about other delegates. So far, I've not heard from anyone, and I don't know the deadline for it, but we do have to work through Rebecca to be a part of the registration process.
Yeah, as far as I know, the only major thing to be voted on will be the issue of the new moderator or co-moderators. And there's no big bylaws things being voted on this year, for example. But some of the the final business resolutions I haven't seen yet that might be voted on. But I want to be there just to sort of keep tabs on things, and I think the co-moderator proposal that includes Bill Young will probably be more stable. There's Bill Young and Bill Young is on the UUA board now, and he seems to be a fairly stable member of the board who I think wants to serve. My impression is he hasn't come out and really in any kind of radical way on anything. He wants to keep things functioning, and so when I ran for the board for the nominating committee a couple of years ago, I worked with Bill Young, and he was very supportive of me being a petition candidate. And so, and he doesn't seem to be coming in with the agendas that some people have. But on the other hand, he also goes along with what's going on too. So I don't know. And some of us went to try to see if we can't have some kind of meeting with him by Zoom before the General Assembly to question him on certain issues.
Let me make note that at about 5:20, we lost Luba and Sue,
Right.
who were going to another activity they were committed to.
So if UMIAC or UUJC, if they arrange something with Bill Young and the other candidates, I'll notify you in case people are interested in that.
Yeah.
But right now, there's a lot of these people are not well known as to what they might do even. Some have a record like Bill Young, but we don't know what direction they might want to take the UUA in.
Well, you reported.
If you don't know, the moderator is the chair of the board, and effectively the almost like the CEO of a corporation. The chair of the board has the final authority over the budget. I mean, the board has the final authority over the budget, for example. And the president is elected separately, and they're sort of elected to be a kind of a leader, but it's the board that has the final authority.
Okay, you shared with us before that the amendments to Article 3 seem to be pushed a little bit toward the back of the stove. Is that
Yeah, it's still not scheduled even. The last board meeting, they went over the schedule for the bylaws committee, and I think next year they're going to be voting on certain bylaw changes, but they're fairly routine and minor changes. And the discussion on Article 3, which has to do with the congregational polity, is not even scheduled yet.
Okay. One other little thing that I didn't comment about before, and actually we're actually under the member input, and so since I'm a member, I'll give a little thing. I don't know whether to be disappointed or whether it's just something that it will come out in the next Sun, but I skimmed through, as I said in my message that I tried to get in there as just a contributing, church member. I skimmed through the UU world almost reluctantly because I'm afraid of some of the stuff that's in there that I don't even want to hear or read about. But there were some darn good articles in there, some impressive articles. And I sent a message, which didn't get in the sun, that I encouraged people to, as reluctant as they might be about the UU world and things going on at UUA, that there was some pretty good reading in there on several topics. And it didn't get in the sun. Now maybe it'll get in the next sun, but I would hate to think that an opinion about reading articles in the UU world would be censored. So,
No, it's the U world.
no, I mean, my comment that I sent in the sun encouraging people to look at some articles in there, and I even mentioned 3 articles one of them was the history of,
Like the Channing article.
yeah,
I
yeah.
read that, and
Oh.
I don't know if you ever, most people don't know, but there's actually a whole book, a big thick book of Channing's sermons, and I actually read that once.
Oh,
Or
Jesus.
not. Well, that's because when I was in college, I decided I was a conscientious objector, and I needed to dig into UU history to find out if I had support for that in UU history. So I actually read Channing, and I went to Thoreau and,
Wow.
MLK, Gandhi, lots of things, but John Haynes Holmes. So I found enough UU history to be accepted as a conscientious objector.
Wow.
But this the UU world used to reflect all this stuff like on white supremacy culture. Not a word on that in this one. And I
True.
also being on focusing on history and talking about Channing, I thought that they might have said something about the issue of slavery and abolition. Channing served a fairly wealthy congregation in Boston, and my understanding is that um, he was, against the slavery, supportive of abolition, but had to keep a fairly low key profile on that because he had some pretty wealthy congregants who were not in the slave trade, but maybe getting cotton and doing manufactures in the North or something like that that benefited from that. And that issue wasn't raised at all, which I thought, this is interesting. Because in
Yeah.
the past, everything had to be interpreted through this particular racial lens, and that didn't happen this time.
Yeah, it had a different feeling, I guess, is the lack of the thing.
There were still no letters to the editor, though, or
No.
any acknowledgement that were any kind of dissidents. I think I did see one phrase quoted in one of the articles that said there was somebody was having some trouble with the resistance in the UUA and whatnot, but they didn't call it alt-right like they have in the past or anything like that. It was just a very, very tangential reference to some of us who have been unhappy with some of the authoritarian kinds of things going on, like the Ministerial Fellowship Committee and whatnot.
Well, and there was an interesting article about the Black UU organization, which I didn't know anything about, and that was very informative, from a standpoint of being informed. So that's it. Any other comments from anybody?
Tom, I'm wondering if you'd be willing to stay after and stop the recording and speak with me for a minute?
Say that again slower.
I'm wondering if you'd be able to stay after our other gentlemen leave and
Oh.
speak with me for a moment privately, and we can stop the recording.
How do I stop the recording?
I think I'll leave now, okay?
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, you guys can bail, but we need to stop the recording if you and I are gonna talk. How do I do that, Lynn? I see a little dot at the thing says recording with a little dot that's pulsing.
I
Okay,
don't
I'm
have-
signing off.
Okay,
I don't have those privileges, so I don't believe.
uh,
Do you have privileges are you logged in as you or as
well,
UUC?
I'm logged in as me on the church site though. I can change my name up with the 3 dots up above. I could have put in administrative, but
So can you click on recording and do anything? If you click on it?
that's not doing anything. I don't know, there's a button down below that says more. That doesn't do any good. I don't know how to do that, Lynn. Can
Okay,
can
that's
we
all right.
talk, can we talk on the phone? Or what?
Not tonight, but another time.
Okay, yeah, so, but to kind of unofficially, since the meeting's over, you have till the 27th to get a member-sponsored amendment, you know, to the board, and I guess that would be to me. Or, well, you could send it to the whole board using that email address for the entire board. And then we have, I should have gotten the board to authorize me to appoint a subcommittee to look at the amendment, because they're supposed to review it. But the next board meeting will actually come after the 14-day notice. So I don't know how to do that. But at any rate, another discussion, another time. Yeah, I'm up for it.
Okay, bye-bye.
And, yeah, I still respect and value. We just have some issues we disagree on. So,
I
yeah,
think it's a little bit more than that, though, Tom.
well,
Thank you.
could be.
Have a good night.
Okay, good night.